Academy podcast with Phil Zito, episode 488. Hey folks, Phil Zito here, and welcome to episode 488 of the Smart Buildings Academy podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking with Jonathan Lewis of Johnson Controls. In this episode, we're going to be going through the Facility Explorer suite of software, just talking about how it works, what they do, how from start to finish they support their channel. I found this interesting because I'm always trying to figure out, especially since we train so many contractors and system integrators, kind of how do the larger OEMs support their channel. As always, you know, we're vendor agnostic. We don't go and endorse any building automation OEM. It was just an interesting conversation to kind of see how they're approaching supporting their subcontractors, what tool sets they're developing, how they automate things, and what they see as the future as far as supporting their contracting channel in order to ensure that they have the tools to estimate and design and implement their control system, which is Facility Explorer. So with that being said, as always, all notes, the transcript, all links will be available at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/488. Once again, that is podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/488. All right, let's get on with the episode. Okay. Hey, folks, we're here with Jonathan Lewis again. So for those of you who don't know, we actually recorded a podcast episode at AHR. Someone who's in this podcast episode right now may or may not have bumped into the recording device and unplugged it. That still is out to be determined. But anywho, we're here again. And we actually, I think this one will be even better because there's some little notes I jotted down that we didn't have before. So Jonathan is obviously with Johnson Controls, and he is all channel sales for the ABCS channel for the Americas, correct? Am I remembering correctly?
That is correct. Yeah.
Awesome. And I've known Jonathan for a while here, being a former JCI alumni myself. And where I wanted to take this, when he and I spoke at AHR, I had just done a BAS 101 session in the morning, and we went through the project lifecycle. And one of the things that was eye-opening to me was so many people came up and said, we didn't know how BAS projects are executed. So Jonathan and I were talking before this episode, and I was like, you know, I bet there's a bunch of people out there who don't know all the tools and resources, especially if they're part of the ABCS channel, to go and execute projects from start to finish. So we're going to go through from sales all the way down to operations, the different tool sets that exist. We're going to get Jonathan's perspective on what he's seeing in the channel from an enablement perspective, from a tool perspective, and we're going to just take y'all through it. So Jonathan, thanks for being here again. I appreciate it. And let's dive in. So we started off last time with sales and with channel enablement. Walking the show floor, I saw an increasing amount of people that were focused on what I, for lack of a better word, will call secondary channel enablement. So enabling mechanical contractors, enabling controls contractors to be able to sell and then to be able to service opportunities. But I want to focus on sales and I want to focus on construction. So right now, one of the biggest issues I see in the market is one, identifying opportunities. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. What I also see is two, estimating opportunities. So I'd like to, so back when I worked at Johnson, this could date me, it was Presto, and Presto wasn't available yet to the secondary channel, but now you actually have estimating tools. So I'm interested in how that works and how you're seeing that enable your channel right now.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Phil, thank you for having us again. You know, it's always a pleasure to spend some time with you. So the best answer to your question is yes. Decades ago, JCI made huge investments to ensure that their engineering tools provided the most amount of efficiency to the field. And thankfully, we have been able to bring some of those investments and some of that technology into the indirect channel. So the most important thing that we want to position as a manufacturer of control products is that we are in the solution business. We're selling systems. We're not selling products. So when you think of a building and you think of all the systems that make it possible, anything that you're going to control, monitor, or integrate is a system, right? We do use components and we use parts and pieces to make that work, but the outcome and the solution is what we're really looking for. So based on that idea, our selection tools are designed around mechanical systems, whether air handler unit, terminal equipment, chiller plants, boiler plants, and what we have been able to do is provide a suggested time related to that system. So consider this like a manufacturer suggested time based on the utilization of our processes and tools in order for you to estimate how long it should take to coordinate or execute the different phases required to complete, these projects, right? In construction specifically. So we don't look at the part number only, we look at the part number as a system, how those components come together. And we have information that allows us to put an estimated time, that it would require to do it based on our tools and internal processes. And that's what we try to share with our channel partners.
So I do have some additional questions that I didn't think about last time we talked.
Sure.
But on the material side, do you tie back into so I know like when I worked at JCI, we had an internal kind of procurement distribution tool all in and of itself. How do you all tie back into distribution of not only JCI product, but third-party product? Is that in the tool, or what does that look like?
Absolutely. We have over 13,000 SKUs. We not only carry products that we manufacture, but we have incredible partnerships with preferred vendors that allow us to put their brand in our tools to ensure that we have a full bill of material or a full solution, right? So whether you're executing an air handler unit where you're requiring, I don't know, IDEC relays or, functional devices or, things like that, to the devices that we manufacture, return a temperature sensor, supply sensors, to the controllers, right? So the idea here is to provide a way for the user to have a completely way to cover the cost of the system for the estimating purposes to ensure that nothing is missed, trying to minimize any slippage or any missed opportunities, for the scope of the project.
Got you. Just genuinely curious, do you pre-negotiate like purchase terms for the ABCSs if they go through that channel?
Absolutely, yeah. So we offer competitive pricing for the indirect channel on manufactured products by JCI or any product that is listed within our tools. Basically, we use JCI's buying power, right, to provide some of those savings and provide competitive pricing to the partners.
Interesting. Okay. On the side of trip charges, slippage, risk, all of those things, is that built into the, oh my gosh, if I could speak, is that built into the tool as well?
Yes. So risk and proficiency is a line item that is included into our tools, as well as a scale of proficiency. So it is very important. Yeah, it's very important to cover two aspects of what we do when we're estimating. One is to ensure that your level of proficiency is reflected on the way you're estimating. We do know that the barrier to entry in this industry, it's basically the human resource, it's the human talent. We also know that there is a huge gap between the new generation and the generations that are basically retiring today, right? And so it is important to capture that when you're estimating a project. Depends on the size of the complexity of the project. You may require a different level of proficiency, which could reflect into more or less hours of execution based on the experience of the people executing. That's one level.
Interesting.
The second level is related to terminal counts. So we also know that for any competitive bid, you could be maybe a little high on a boiler plant, on a chiller plant. You could add an extra few hours here or there for an integration, that you may not familiar with, but you cannot take any chance in today's market and be off by half an hour or an hour on 200 VAV boxes. So
Absolutely.
terminal equipment is fundamental to the execution and the competitiveness of construction projects. And therefore, we make sure that these estimating tools reflect the highest level of efficiency when you're executing multiples, when they're by hundreds or by the dozens, because this is, one of the areas that can create huge challenges and huge slippage, for operation teams. So those are the two areas: the recent proficiency in terms of how well and what level of expertise the team has, but then more important, how many of these systems are you going to execute and what kind of built-in efficiency you can have within to ensure that, that you are going with the most competitive price with the minimum risk at time of bid.
Got it. So two more questions before I move on to release to operations. One
Sure.
would be around factory mounting. Do ABCSs have access to factoring mounting of terminal units?
So not in all cases, just because of the coordination that it requires with the agent or whoever is facilitating the equipment.
Got
But
it.
if coordinated properly, factory mounting is absolutely a solution. The challenges that we face today is related to supply chain, right?
Yeah.
You've seen some of the disruption that COVID created. So the delivery times of equipment matching with controls as a whole, may not be the most efficient in today's world. So it's in most cases, it's easier, to do them separately just because of the compressed schedules and the way they run. Now, there are projects that require, this type of opportunities. So, it's all about that preparation in advance.
Got it. So agent, it depends on their relationship with their agent, being ahead of it, and also if it just makes sense from a scale perspective.
Yeah. So
That makes sense.
think about, I I often want to reflect back on the fact that many projects buy controls basically in the last 80% of the planning phase, right?
Yeah.
So they're negotiating pricing after the electrical has been selected, the mechanical has been selected, right? So if you have in a scenario where you have people already running with POs to execute and order material and order products, and you're just shopping for controls towards the end of the project, more likely that will not be a great candidate for factory mounted controls, just because of the matching of the lead times between equipment, which is 12, 15, 30 weeks, in advance, and control, which is, a little more fast paced.
I don't know this, but I'm curious. Do you have any ABCSs that are agents for equipment as well?
Yes, we do have a few ABCSs throughout North America that also carry equipment lines or represent equipment lines with Johnson Controls.
Okay, so they could coordinate. All right, that makes sense. Last question on that. Actually, I keep saying last. I got to stop saying last question because it just created another question.
To the next one.
But maybe last question after this one. So electrical subs, are you all thinking about this? Because I don't know if any OEMs are, but a coordinated like regional effort to identify subcontractors by spend and then put together some sort of training or certification or preferred vendor program for them to really help the ABCSs have a reliable installer. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's a two-part question. So start by saying that some of our best contractors, whether they're ASIs or ABCSs, self-perform installation.
Mm.
So that's a very welcome attribute, to any channel partner or anybody interested in joining the controls industry. The more self-performed installation that you could do, the less risk you're taking, and the better you can manage the execution of the project, and the
Mm.
faster that you'll be able to build a bench of people that can be promoted within, right? Because
Yeah.
installation is the foundation of not having any slippage when it comes down to commissioning and other things that we'll talk about in terms of validation. That's one part. The second part is, yes, we do offer ways and programs to encourage training and development of subcontractors that only want to focus on electronical installation. So, in our previous discussion, we talked about how much we value and the importance of the FAN 410, for example.
Yep.
The fact that we make it open to anybody, and that little reference is like a Bible, for anybody that is doing controls in terms of understanding how to connect general signals, right? It's not
Hmm.
proprietary. We're just talking about anybody that handles 0 to 10, 4 to 20 volt and milliamp signals, or any input or any digital output out there. So these type of efforts in terms of trainings and materials, collaterals, these kind of resources, we make available to ensure that everybody has as much information as possible. That also combined with the selection tool that includes engineering details for
Yep.
installation purposes, not
Yep.
commissioning, right? So where to land the wires, what are the details on, utilizing some of these informations that we disclose on the FAN 410.
Interesting. So, what I think is the last question on this, tariffs. And I
Yeah,
understand if you're not prepared to answer this, but
sure.
I don't really keep up with the news as well as I should. But I had a couple people tell me that it looks like tariffs between Canada and Mexico might be reinstated. I don't know if that's the case. Um, do you all foresee that as a challenge? And if so, uh, what, if anything, are you all doing to kind of hedge against that? And like I said,
Yeah,
it's okay if, because
yeah,
this just popped in my head.
yeah, no problem. Listen, the tariff situation is very fluid. Currently, what we know is that these tariffs between Mexico and Canada are on hold until March 4th. We
Yeah.
continue to monitor. We have sent multiple communications externally and internally to ensure that people are aware that that is being evaluated, and then as soon as we hear something, we will provide whatever corrective action is needed. The most important thing to remember or to know is that there is no time like now. So whether you are trying to secure some inventory, secure some stock, and I think the best hedge, if you will, against of whatever comes down the line or in the future, is to act now in terms of being able to take advantage of the prices and the inventory that is current today, because
Yeah.
it's only going to change. It continues to be fluid. It's only going to change, but we don't see any of those changes regressing to a position different to the one we have today.
Interesting. Okay. So we've done the estimate, we've created the estimate, we've estimated labor, materials, subs, put in all of our risk factors, our trip charges, etc. We now move to a release to operations. How does the tool set as it stands today facilitate that?
We do it in two ways, two main ways. The first one is to ensure, this is something we touched on before, right?
Yeah.
One of the most important steps between transferring knowledge between estimating or the sales phase and the actual operation is not to lose the engineering invested, the time invested in the engineering and the takeoff of the estimate. So one of the efforts that we try to enforce during our trainings is to ensure that the turnover should take place utilizing the estimate given, which will
Mm.
generate systems, counts, and a very rough draft of a submittal. that should
Yeah.
be utilized, as part of the basis, if you will, or the wireframe for the submittal process that the operations has to provide, right? So that's
Mm.
one. The second piece that is very important to us is that through our selections, we do facilitate sample graphics, and we facilitate basic programs that can outline the sequence of operations selected during the estimating tool, which is, once again, an incredible tool for consultant engineers, an incredible tool for owners, or anybody that is working on that pre-sale phase of the project, trying to understand, how to simulate, or, how the building would look, or, what kind of finishes it's going to have in terms of the interface provided, from JCI, et cetera, right? So
Hmm.
taking the input taking the input from specifications and plans, putting it through the machine, meaning the tool, and having a product or an outcome that outlines, what the final product is going to be. It's extremely powerful to the user, and it's extremely powerful to, the customer. So we focus on
Let
that a lot.
let me ask you. So, if you see me looking down, it's because I'm taking notes as you're speaking, and I'm kind of thinking, what is that second, third level questions? So, one of the things I see at a lot of contractors is they have little to no PM tool sets or project management tool sets, little to no financial tool sets. Do you have for the contractor side? I guess you don't, but I'll be surprised if you do have a kind of booking suite, financial management suite, or PM tool suite for them to use?
So not booking, because we're not into the ERP, right?
Yeah.
But Selection Navigator and Solution Navigator can be used for project management. So
Interesting. I didn't know
you
that.
can
How?
you could keep track of the percentage of completion, and you can keep track of the documentation related to the project. So we talk in different phases, right? We talk about the estimating, and then transferring and creating submittals, which is your engineering phase. And then once you mobilize, to the site, meaning your electricians already are completing 80% of the
Hmm.
work, and you're about to have power, you can create, document, and store all your commissioning sheets, and project related information, uh, inside of this estimate, inside of this project folder that you created. No
Oh,
different than the thing you remember in the past. What we do not have, but we do train, it's on cash management and cash flow, right? How
yeah.
to properly try to cash flow a project based on percentage of completion, understanding that, the quicker, or the fastest way you can generate cash flow, for most of these construction projects, is related to generating the proper amount of engineering upfront, and
Correct.
then usually the shipment and the ordering, approval, and ordering, uh, actually selection, approval, and ordering of valves, which is probably the number one driver of positive cash flow for any controls contractor out there executing, these kind of construction opportunities when valves are available and transformers.
Yeah.
So
So, no, go ahead.
yeah, so we do not get into their ERPs or their cash management system, but we do our best to coach them and provide feedback on how bigger contractors and successful operations manage, cash flow when mobilizing to a site.
So the tool set will create the checkout sheets, functional test sheets. Does it do test and balance sheets and things like that?
So
Or is that kind of, go ahead.
test and balance features are part of the tool set. It doesn't generate documentation, because that's usually generated and provided by the test and balance contractor. But the
Yeah, that makes sense.
capability, the capability is there for the test and balance to use the tools in order to, capture K factors and modify K factors and so on.
So, okay, so we've got the release to operations done. We've created an initial set of a submittal set that can be modified and sent off. Do you see, so one thing that you said that kind of piqued my interest, because, going and, um, purchasing the valves, sensors, transformers, yeah, that's pretty standard. But do you see people who are able in like POC 40, POC 30 to bill for programming or bill for graphics since the tool can automatically generate them?
Well, so it all depends on the plan and spec world throughout America is an art, right? So you have
Yeah, it is.
different weathers, you have different specifications, you have different general conditions. So it'll
Yep.
be irresponsible to basically say that every project runs on very similar percentage of completion. What we do know, right, is that because the controls contractor is required towards the last 20% of the execution of the project, the best way to generate positive cash flow, and for us is to pick up as much as the mechanical needs as possible. So that's
Yeah.
either whether it's transformer panels, mechanical devices, valves, actuators, dampers. The reason
Yep.
being is because these will drive revenue earlier in the project without a requirement of being on site or
Yes.
having to these are items that get installed by others and commissioned by us later down in life.
I
So
actually want to pause on that for a second
yeah.
because that is a key point that some folks who are listening to this hopefully picked up on, which is because initially my brain goes to, okay, you want to order the mechanical parts, but you also want to order the stuff that the electrician needs. But the key point is by ordering the stuff the mechanical needs, literally your only labor cost, and sometimes this isn't even a labor cost, is receiving and delivering to site. Sometimes you can directly deliver to the mechanical, which then you have your margin on top of your material, and you can charge that out, but you have no carrying cost, no labor cost. You do have carrying costs, but you have no labor cost. If you do the electrical and the electrical is your sub or in-house, you do have some labor. So that's a really key point that I hope people picked up on, that I'm sure some folks listening to this aren't currently considering, is what material can I buy that will get approved, that I can bill out, that I can give to someone on site that costs me no labor. So
So any any
yeah,
any material field that requires delivery delivery to the site, and said differently, there is a number of components and products that
yep,
require no power and early delivery to the site. And they're
yeah,
usually
absolutely.
related to mechanical and electrical applications outside of controls, right? So they're not high voltage, they're not low voltage, I'm sorry, right? They're probably high voltage or they're mechanically driven, whether they're actuators, dampers, louvers, fire smoke dampers, valves, etc., right? So these kind of components, that require no control intervention, meaning they're not low voltage, they're going to be commissioning later, they're going to be commissioning towards the last 20% of the project. They, for the most part, and depending on where you are in the country, do provide the opportunity to drive a positive cash flow opportunity when you're running a project.
Got it. So that
So
made me think, go ahead.
between that and your engineer submittals, you should be able to have a compelling case if you use the right tools to be very efficient. So we try to work really hard on ensuring that a lot of the work done during the estimating phase is using the engineering phase,
Yes.
not only to cover costs, but to have the proper counts and to tweak the systems. So when those systems get delivered under engineering as a submittal package, there's some savings in the time, the engineering bucket, if you will.
And what I also hear you say, and I'll come back to what I was just about to ask you in a second, is it's incredibly important to have an actual release to operations where you process any addendums, you submit any RFIs. Because if you do this, then you'll be able to go and submit your submittals sooner, get approval, get material ordered, and actually start getting positive cash flow. Um,
Absolutely.
question question though. So this made me think there are tools out there like Bluebeam, which are using like optical character recognition for takeoffs. Are you all looking at any tools to assist in takeoffs, or do you have any tools to assist in takeoffs?
So for takeoff, we use external tools. Many of our
Okay.
channel partners use Bluebeam and other. And the reason being is because they do have to comply with the different standards provided by the contracting chain. So whether
Gotcha.
they're CAD drawings, PDF, Adobe, so forth and so on. So those
Makes
external
sense.
tools become very, very useful for object count and system count.
Interesting. I'm just pulling up something that, depending on how much time we have, I'm going to share something with you that I think you'll find cool. All
Absolutely.
right. Let's keep moving along here. So we talked about engineering. The engineering tool, it produces the graphics, it produces the programs, it'll produce everything you would expect in a submittal set. That's pretty basic. We don't have to spend time on that. Um, it generates the CAF files. So everyone listening to this, if they work with Facility Explorer, should know what CAF files are. They should know, how the graphics and all that is generated. I would assume that may not be a safe assumption, but I assume. Um, so from there, we go from engineering, we go to field work. We've built out the bill of materials. We've ordered it. It's showed up on site. Mechanicals installed their piece. Subs installed their piece. Let's talk about functional test tools specific to automating point to point, automating functional test, just any quality of life slash efficiency tools on that end for the startup tech.
Excellent. Yeah. So now that you have delivered the package and there is some coordination that happened with the subcontractor is following submittals, your very first starting point is hardware verification. So this is either hardware verification or point-to-point verification. There are many methods out there, from the old point-to-point opening every wire. I don't know that that's something that gets done today in today's compressed schedule world, with the contracting chain. But the equivalent to a point-to-point verification also can be done through software. Okay, so that ensures that the installation of the signals is proper and verified. Once that gets proven, then you could start a functional testing, which is usually divided into two. One, looking at the simple activity of a control loop. So whether the input, output, and set point are related to each other, and the speed loops are working and circular. And then the other one is actual verifying that the sequence in which those control loops are being executed comply with the sequence of operation. So those
Yep.
are your three, at the very base level, the three activities and three actions that you could create and execute out of the same tool set, here, which is hardware verification, ensuring that your control loops are working, and then following that those control loops are working in sequence to ensure that you're meeting the specification.
Okay. Got it.
And once you do that, then you can use extensions within the system, right? So an extension is anything that you can measure or you can capture. It could be a pulse, or it could be, some type of repository to any of the signals within the system.
Mm.
And as you capture that, you can create basically a log of trends that at the same time can generate alarms, to ensure that the system is working properly. And based on those logs, you could prove to anybody that the system is running and has been running as designed.
So this brings up a question that I got asked in between the previous episode you and I did and this one, which is back when I worked with y'all. Um, we were working with the Cisco team on the industrial switches and MRP rings and everything. That was just starting to come out. That kind of dates myself. But one of the things, and we talked about it, my instructor team and I talked about it in a podcast we recorded earlier this week, is the IP controls dilemma. And I'm going to tee this up and describe what I call the IP controls dilemma. The dilemma is customer IT gets put in after certificate of occupancy as part of FF&E budget for most projects. Yet, as an industry, we're pushing IP controls, which I used to be on the fence. I support now, especially now that a lot of the issues that existed have been worked out, which that's a whole nother podcast episode. I'm interested from your perspective. The JCI branch, it's easy to answer it from that perspective. The perspective I'm interested in is from an ABCS. How do you see them going about identifying the IT infrastructure they need? Like they need these switches to just get the job off the ground. Estimating that, procuring that, and then deploying that. Do you all facilitate that? Do you have partnerships with maybe like Optigo or with Cisco? I mean, what does that look like in your world? Because IP controls, there's very little delta between them and MSTP controls now.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
Yeah. So we have partnered up with Cisco to use the IE 3000. We have evolved into the IE 3000, which is quite robust, construction grade switch, and as technology, as the adoption of IP continues to increase and advance, it is very important, or we more and more realize how important it is to have independent and individual networks for controls, which makes it much, much easier from a security perspective, from a management perspective, I mean, from an IT infrastructure perspective to manage, right? So I think you and I grew up in a time where when we wanted IT, we just grab an extra drop from the existing backbone or network, and we just plug in our supervisory devices. I think those days are gone, and new construction is requiring independent networks, not only for control, but for many other technologies out there, right? And this is not different. So as you individualize these needs for technology, the requirements are driven in a way that can accommodate for the schedule, for the power, for the conditions, right? If I go back to my history doing construction 20 years ago, the painters didn't have the power that they have today, in a hospital, right? And if you want to paint anything in a hospital today, it has to be conditioned space. That didn't used to be the case, 20 years ago. So the adoption of these new requirements always drive a new behavior and a way to accommodate and do. And I think that if it's clarified and specified that the controls network needs to be an independent IT network, I see no issue on executing an IP project, with all the benefits of MSTP plus the increased value, right?
Yeah, we need to when you and I finish this episode, we'll talk offline. I want to get your contact at Cisco because I think that'd be a cool podcast to do because so many people don't I actually have an IE 2000 sitting in my cabinet over there. I don't think they make those anymore, but interesting. Okay, so the ABCSs can go and purchase that.
Yeah. So
okay.
We have an agreement with Cisco. They can go through their network and they can purchase And it's a very generic router
Yeah.
switch. I'm sorry.
But
It's a very
it's
generic switch.
I'm going to get a little technical, and
Yeah.
it's totally fine if you don't want to go down this nerd path with me. It's totally cool.
Okay.
Do they have to go? How do I ask this? My experience working with Cisco switches was you had to terminal into them and get into the command line and actually like code stuff. Do you know if they still have to do that, or if there's like you all worked with them to build some sort of like GUI so they can set it
So
up graphically?
the process in which a 3000 gets loaded is through an SD card that has an inventory of the devices that are going to be part of the network,
Interesting. Really?
which is part of the engineering and takeoff. So as you are designing the network and identifying how many devices, where you're going to start, where you're going to end, this is the information that gets populated into basically in a spreadsheet, and that information gets loaded into an SD card that it becomes part of the database of that IE 3000.
Oh, so they don't even have to actually go and do anything.
No.
Interesting. Did
No.
You can still
So
hear me,
no.
right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can still hear you. Can
All
you hear
right,
me?
good. Yes.
Hey, that noise with the disclaimer that every project does have their own requirements in terms of network addressing, and distances and fallbacks, and right. So I don't want to speak that the IE 3000 only requires one file download and that's it, right? Every network setting and environment is completely different from many others. So I just want to I don't want to generalize, but for setting up purposes, it's quite simple for the ABCS.
Sorry about asking you if you could hear me. I saw like multiple text messages. I left the grill on, and my wife was like, "How do you turn it off?" And so the joys of working from home these days, right? No,
Absolutely,
so yeah,
flexibility.
I get that. I get that it's not going to be perfect, and you may have to tweak the settings, but just the fact that they don't have to go in the the command line and actually
No,
go, and that's good to hear, because that was my concern when this one person who happened to be a JCI ABCS reached out to me on LinkedIn and was like, "Hey, what do you recommend?" And I was like, well, I think you all use the IE switches, and that this
yeah,
confirms it. That yeah, that is true. Okay, good. Okay, so we got about 12 minutes left. Let me send this message to the wizard behind the screen to see if they can enable sharing, because I want to show you something that I didn't prep you at all for this. I think you'll find it interesting, because one, it shows something pretty cool as far as AI, and I'm curious if you all are thinking anything related to this. I'm gonna bring it up here, and plus it shows that you all have a really cool naming standard that AI recognizes.
we
Okay,
have the best naming
so
standard.
seriously, like I can always tell if someone worked at JCI, and people can tell I worked there because how I name things whenever I work with people. Okay, so my instructor staff and I were going, and let me just do this. Put myself on do not disturb so my company messages don't start popping up. Okay, so my instructors, you should be seeing my screen, right?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, my instructors and I are sitting, and I'm not going to show the graphic just because copyright, all that jazz. But we're sitting there doing a podcast episode, and we start talking about the future of engineering. And so I'm like, you know what? Let's throw a graphic in Chat GPT and ask it to create a sequence. Then let's ask it to create a points list. Then let's ask it to create a bill of materials, right? And so we do that. And then I say, hey, create a prompt so that anytime I throw a graphic in, you'll just go and create this for me. And so I threw the graphic in. It wrote the sequence of operations. You can already start seeing the JCI naming standard, right?
Yep.
So it writes the sequence. It writes the points list. It writes the bill of materials. So, and then I say, based on the naming structure of these points, what BAS system do you think this is? And it notices Johnson Controls standard nomenclature. It notices that it's most likely a Graphics Plus or JCI MRE graphics package. I thought it was really cool. But my whole point of showing you this is there any thought, and if you don't know, totally cool, to go and be able to just take screenshots of MEP sets and submit it into the tool, and the tool is trained on these. And then instead of even using the system selection tool now, instead of clicking, they literally just upload a package or a screenshot and it does it all, or it gets close.
Yeah. We do not have that feature. I know that this is something of interest and that we continue to explore and work on. Generative AI still has their challenges, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So and again, we are in the business of selling low risk and high confidence.
I hear you.
So we need to be able to provide an outcome that has the minimum or that has basically virtually no risk possible, right? So it has to be almost perfect. So for example, how would that tool identify humidity control on a graphic?
Yeah, that's exactly where my instructors went. They were like, okay, yeah, but how's it going to know humidity? How's it going to know DCV, demand control ventilation? How's it going to know all these things? And I'm like, yeah, maybe it won't from the graphic, but it gets you a starting point, especially if you're like retro commissioning and you're going and all you have are the graphics, because there's so many sites where they, for whatever reason, did not get O&Ms. Hey, don't worry, because I don't know of any other company that has this capability yet either. So,
it's definitely an area and opportunity, and I know that this is something worth exploring. I just know that from a business perspective, on my everyday life, we have to sell the least amount of risk and the highest amount of confidence. So you do have to bring a tool that has 100% assurance that you're not missing anything, because it could cost you, the job.
Well, absolutely. Well, I think it's even bigger than that, because you're handling multiple billions of dollars of controls work. So I think it could have ramifications. I think it's got its place. I honestly, in this 100%. Discussion with you, makes me further confirms for me that this will first be used as in like retrofit site audits, things like that, where because it could get, while that sequence may not be completely accurate, it could at least get a sales rep or a service tech half of the way there, and then they 100%. Just have to ask questions. So
100%. Yeah, I mean, again, one of the biggest challenges we have is people. So anytime that you can enable tools or processes that can lower the barrier of understanding, the barrier to entry, it's welcome. So any tool that allows us to do that, more power.
Well, if you want to do a joint venture on a retro commissioning tool.
I mean, love to.
No, I'm just joking. But in all seriousness, this was fun. I think the questions, we got to go a lot deeper. I think this actually worked out for the audience, because doing it the second time, I came into this with a lot more questions. What I hope the audience took from this, and I appreciate you being here today, Jonathan. What I hope they took from this is the tool set that's available to them as part of your channel, the different nuances to think of, and how to generate revenue, but also how to use a tool set to potentially drive the completion of projects more successfully. Before we wrap this up, is there anything else you would like to add before we close this off?
Just to thank you for the opportunity and for what you do, right? We love the fact that you're bringing awareness and attention to our industry, which is needed. We need people to be interested. We need people to understand that this is no longer just an HVAC play, but a technology play. And the
Yeah.
future of buildings, starts, with these controls, with these integrations, So I am excited to see where you go, with this message. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
cannot wait for more people to be interested in what we do.
Perfect. Thank you. Alrighty, folks. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Jonathan Lewis. I hope you learned a little bit about how the OEMs approach their secondary channel or their contracting channel or their authorized building contractor channel, whatever your OEM of choice calls it. It was interesting to look at their tool set, to kind of hear how they're approaching their tool set, to hear how they're enabling contractors. As always, everything is available at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/488. Can you do me a favor? If you found this valuable, please go on to Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Leave us a 5-star review if you think we've earned it. Please share this on LinkedIn by hitting the share button, or like and subscribe at YouTube, or share if you're on Facebook. This really helps us spread the word. We're almost at about 10,000 subscribers at YouTube, which is, for a building automation and smart buildings channel, is pretty big. So that's all because of you. Really appreciate that. Thanks so much, everybody. I hope you found this